Hello. It is so good that you found the time for this session. Make yourself comfortable. Valerie woke up to the smell of pancakes. A rich, buttery aroma drifted from the kitchen, slipping under the blanket and tickling her nose. She smiled without opening her eyes. Ian was making breakfast. This didn't happen often, maybe once every 2 months, but every time it did, it felt like a little holiday. 15 years ago, she had married a man who couldn't even fry an egg. He used to stand in the kitchen, bewildered, holding a frying pan with both hands as if it might bite him. And now pancakes with crispy edges, thin and golden. Did he learn, or did someone teach him? But Valerie chased such thoughts away. Why ruin the morning? Mom, get up. Daisy, her energetic 9-year-old with auburn pigtails, flew into the room. Dad is making pancakes. With maple syrup and berries. I'm coming. Valerie stretched and threw off the blanket. In the kitchen, Kyle, her serious 14-year-old, was already sitting. He was a carbon copy of his father. The same strong jaw, the same hazel green eyes, the same stubborn forehead. He ate in silence, glued to his phone, and merely gave his mother a nod in greeting. Good morning, traveler. Ian turned from the stove, waving a spatula. The final breakfast before the grand departure. Valerie sat at the kitchen island, resting her cheek on her hand. In 6 hours, they had an Amtrak train to catch. In 24, they would be at the ocean. 2 weeks without cooking, without laundry, without the endless cycle of household chores. She had earned this vacation. 3 years without a proper break was no joke. The last time they traveled as a whole family was when Daisy was 6. They had rented a beach house in Florida, grilled seafood on the patio, and Kyle, still just a little boy then, had caught crabs in the rocks and put them in a bucket. This time, Ian refused to go. He said it was work, a new project at the firm. Management wouldn't let him take time off. Valerie didn't push it. She was used to not pushing. That was her main rule, learned from her mother. Don't pressure a man. If you bend the stick too far, it breaks. Her mother knew a thing or two about such things. She had lived with Valerie's father for 41 years, right up until his final day. I checked your suitcase last night, Ian said, placing a plate in front of her. I packed the phone chargers and updated the first aid kit. And the sunscreen, the one with the high SPF. Remember how Daisy got sunburned last time? I remember. Valerie nodded. A caring, attentive, good father, a good husband. She repeated this to herself like a mantra every time a vague sense of unease stirred inside her. Unease, without a reason, is the worst kind. You can't grasp it, can't name it, can't confront anyone with it. Just a shadow on the wall that flickers and disappears. Sometimes, Ian stayed late at work. Sometimes his phone buzzed late at night, and he would step out onto the balcony to talk so as not to wake you, Val. Sometimes he smelled of unfamiliar perfume, and he would explain that he was standing next to someone on the crowded subway. Valerie believed him, or forced herself to believe. The difference between those two states blurred over the years, like the ridges on an old coin. After breakfast, the packing frenzy began. Daisy bounced around the apartment, shoving a stuffed cat, watercolor paints, and a book about pirates into her backpack. Kyle had packed his backpack the night before, silently and neatly, military style, mimicking his grandfather. Valerie walked through the apartment one last time, unplugged the curling iron, checked the stove, watered the plants, and peeked into the master bedroom. The bed was made, the pillows fluffed. Ian had made an effort. On the nightstand sat their wedding photo. She was in a simple white dress, he in a sharp suit. Both were laughing. They were 25, an entire lifetime ago. Uber is here in 10 minutes. Ian yelled from the hallway. Valerie closed the closet door and grabbed her purse. Documents. She opened her purse, checked for cash, her credit cards, phone, charger, tissues, and motion sickness pills for Daisy. Ready? Ian stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered, his skin holding a tan even without the beach. He smiled his trademark smile, the one that used to make Valerie weak in the knees. They didn't go weak anymore, but it didn't irritate her either. It was a habit, a cozy, warm habit, like an old blanket. Ready, Valerie nodded. In the Uber, Daisy glued her face to the window, counting cars. Kyle sat in the front next to the driver, staying silent. Valerie watched the streets flashing by outside the glass familiar, known down to the last crack in the pavement, and thought that 2 weeks without this scenery would be pure bliss. Ian held her hand. A large, warm palm, a callus on his index finger from his computer mouse. She knew this hand by heart, every line, every scar. This one on the knuckle fell off a bike in childhood. This one on the wrist cut himself fixing a shelf. "Will you call?" she asked. He squeezed her fingers. "I'll miss you." The train station was noisy, crowded, smelling of diesel and pretzels. Ian dragged the suitcases toward the platform. Daisy clung to his jacket, whining that she wanted ice cream. Kyle walked behind them, projecting the independent and slightly arrogant aura of his age. Ian set the suitcases down on the platform and hugged Valerie. "Relax, don't think about anything. I'll handle things here." "Are you sure you'll manage?" Valerie looked into his eyes. "You insult me." He laughed. "It's not my first time staying home alone. I'll work, come home, eat frozen pizza, and watch Monday Night Football. A real man's vacation." Valerie kissed him, smelling his familiar cologne, the woodsy one with the wooden cap that she bought him every year for his birthday. He smelled of reliability. He smelled of home. He smelled of 15 years of building a life together. Ian left. He had to get ready for work. Valerie and her little crew sat on the chairs in the waiting area. She drifted into her thoughts, only to be yanked back by a ringing. "Mom, the train." Daisy tugged at her sleeve. Valerie grabbed her bag, took a step toward the boarding gate, and suddenly stopped. She patted her sides, opened her purse, and dug through the contents. Her ID wasn't there. She had left her driver's license at home. She remembered exactly. She had taken it out last night to verify the hotel booking, put it on the bedroom dresser, and never put it back. 40 minutes until departure. Valerie calculated. "If I take an Uber, I'll make it. 15 minutes there, 15 back." She quickly told her son to sit his sister down and watch her, while she was already sprinting toward the station exit, calling a ride on her app as she ran. The car pulled up in 3 minutes. Valerie gave the address and leaned back in the seat, furious with herself. What an airhead. You do this your whole life check 10 times and still forget the most important thing. The car sped through the half-empty streets. Valerie checked her watch. She'd make it. Assuming no traffic jams, she'd definitely make it. The Uber stopped at her building. Valerie jumped out, punched the code into the intercom, and flew up the stairs to the 3rd floor. The key turned familiarly in the lock, and right from the entryway, she heard Ian's voice. Valerie froze in the foyer, without closing the door behind her. Her hand remained on the handle. Her fingers turned white from the tension. Ian's voice drifted from the kitchen loud, uninhibited, unfamiliar. This was not the Ian who had hugged her on the platform half an hour ago. Not the one who had said, "I'll miss you," and squeezed her hand in his large, warm palm. This was a different person. An entirely different person. "Kitten, I'm free!" His voice rang with delight, like a boy receiving a long-awaited gift. "For 2 whole weeks, my ball and chain rolled out to the ocean. Can you imagine? 14 days, 14 nights. Finally, we can live like normal people." Valerie stood there, not breathing. The air got stuck in her throat, turning into a lump, a stone, a piece of broken glass. She heard every word with devastating clarity, as if she weren't standing in the hallway behind a wall, but right next to him, face to face. "Oh, come on, don't be scared." Ian laughed. He laughed with that exact laugh that used to make Valerie's heart skip a beat. Now, that heart was shattering into pieces. Kyle and Daisy left too. The apartment is empty. Come over today, right now. I already bought wine and candles. Remember last time, when she went to her mother's for the weekend? Last time, to her mother's for the weekend, Valerie remembered. 2 months ago, in March, she had gone to her mom's for her birthday. She stayed the night because her mom wasn't feeling well and didn't want to be alone. Ian had texted her then, "Missing you, the house is so empty without you." She had been so touched she showed her mom, "Look what a great husband I have." Her mom had smiled and said, "You got lucky, sweetie. Got lucky." Ball and chain. Valerie slowly, soundlessly leaned against the wall. Her legs wouldn't hold her. The wallpaper was cool and textured. She had picked it out herself last year, agonizing for ages between beige and peach. She settled on beige. Ian had said, "Then it's fine with me, as long as you like it." How attentive, how caring, what absolute filth. "Why do you keep saying that?" Ian continued, and Valerie could hear him pacing the kitchen, his slippers slapping against the tile. "No, she won't find out. My wife is as gullible as a sheep. In 15 years, she hasn't suspected a thing. Not once. You get it?" I tell her. "I had to work late." And she believes it. I tell her, "Someone sprayed perfume on me on the subway," and she believes it. A saint of a woman, I swear to God, just as boring as a Saturday without football. He laughed again. Valerie covered her mouth with her hand to keep from making a sound. Tears streamed down her cheeks, hot, angry, scalding, but she didn't sob, didn't gasp, didn't cry out. She stood like a pillar, frozen, listening to her life being demolished. Pot roast, casseroles, socks washed, she's got all that down, Ian pontificated. But you understand, kitten, a man needs more than casseroles. A man needs a woman, not a household appliance, in a bathrobe. A household appliance in a bathrobe. Valerie looked at herself. She was wearing a dress, that blue one with white flowers she had put on specifically for the trip. That morning, she had spent a long time twirling in front of the mirror, choosing earrings, putting on lipstick. She wanted to look beautiful for him, so he would remember her leaving, beautiful and fresh, and wait for her, miss her, count the days. But he was counting the minutes until her departure, so he could call his kitten and invite her into their empty apartment. Into their apartment, into their bedroom, onto their bed with the beige duvet cover that Valerie washed every week, onto their pillows that she fluffed every morning. "I'm waiting for you, baby." Ian's voice grew quieter, more velvety. He used to talk to Valerie like that. A long time ago in a different life. "Kiss you. Everywhere." He hung up. Valerie heard him cheerfully, carelessly humming some stupid pop song. Dishes clattered in the sink, the water ran. Normal household sounds that used to signify coziness, warmth, family, now they sounded like a death sentence. Valerie took a step back, then another. Quietly, like a cat, she slipped out the door and carefully, agonizingly, carefully, pulled it shut behind her. The lock clicked, barely audible. She stood on the landing, staring at the welcome mat. "Welcome." Faded letters on a green background. She had bought that mat 3 years ago at the hardware store around the corner. She had rejoiced like a girl. "Look, Ian, how cozy." He had shrugged and said, "It's a normal mat. A normal mat, a normal life, a normal betrayal." Valerie walked down the stairs, clinging to the railing. Her legs felt like cotton, alien, as if they didn't belong to her. The Uber was waiting by the entrance. The driver was impatiently drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "Find it?" he asked, when Valerie got in the car. She didn't immediately understand what he meant. Then she remembered. The ID. She had gone upstairs for her ID and hadn't taken it. She had stood in the foyer, listening to her husband call her a ball and chain and a household appliance, and completely forgot why she had even come back. "1 second, Valerie said. She pulled out her phone and dialed Ian's number. He answered on the second ring, brisk, cheerful. "Val, honey, is everything okay?" Val, honey. A minute ago she was a ball and chain and a sheep, and now Val, honey. "I forgot my ID." Her voice was even, calm, dead, on the dresser in the bedroom. "I'm downstairs by the entrance." "Bring it down, please." "Oh, my little airhead." He laughed. "Be right there. 2 minutes." My little airhead. What tenderness. What care. What absolute bullshit. He bounded out of the building a minute and a half later, wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair slightly messy, smiling. He handed her the ID through the car window. "Here you go. Don't forget anything else." He leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. "Have a great vacation, Val. I'll call you tonight." Valerie took the ID and looked into his eyes, hazel green, clear, without a shadow of guilt. Not a single muscle twitched on his face. Not one. For 15 years, She had lived with a man who could lie so naturally, so effortlessly, that lying had become second nature, a second skin, a second air to breathe. "Thank you," she said. The car pulled away. Valerie looked back. Ian stood by the building, waving. Big, handsome, smiling. Her husband, the father of her children, a traitor. She turned away and closed her eyes. They drove to the station in silence. The driver must have sensed something and didn't try to make small talk, didn't turn on the radio. Valerie stared into the darkness behind her closed eyelids and thought not about what to do, not about how to live from now on. She thought about how many times over the years she had accepted lies as truth, how many times she had convinced herself everything was fine, how many times she had brushed off her intuition, which kept whispering, "Something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong." That perfume on the subway, those late nights at work, that phone call on the balcony, that 3-day business trip in November. He had brought her back a fridge magnet and a box of chocolates. Valerie had been so touched. Wow. He remembered me even on a business trip. But maybe there was no business trip. Maybe he spent 3 days in the next neighborhood over at his kitten's place, and only stopped at a gas station for a magnet right before coming home. The magnet, it was still on their fridge. Small, plastic, with a smiling sun and the words, "Greetings from the South. Greetings from the South. Greetings from a stranger's bed." At the station, Valerie passed through the gates and found her bags and her children. The kids were sitting in the waiting area. "Mom, you took forever," Daisy complained. "We thought the train was gonna leave without you." "It wouldn't have." Kyle looked up, stared at his mother, and frowned. "Mom, what's wrong? Were you crying?" "Allergies," Valerie lied. "The pollen out there." Her son looked at her for a long time, intensely, skeptically. He was a smart kid, too smart for 14. He saw more than he was supposed to, understood more than she wanted him to. "All right," he said, and went back to his phone. They took their seats, and the train jerked into motion. The platform drifted past the window, slowly, reluctantly, as if it didn't want to let them go. Valerie sat by the window and watched the city slip away behind them. Houses, trees, bridges, empty lots, everything familiar, known, dear. Everything that just an hour ago seemed like the foundation of her life, and had now turned into a stage set. A beautiful, convincing, but fake stage set, behind which hid absolute emptiness. Daisy fell asleep by evening, curled up in her seat. Kyle lay back with his headphones on, watching something on his phone. Valerie pulled out her phone. 9 missed calls from Ian, 3 text messages. "Val, honey, did you make it? Text me. I'm worried. Val, why are you ignoring me? Is everything okay? Love you and the kids. Miss you already. Miss you already. Of course you miss me. Kitten probably hasn't come over yet. That's why you miss me. That's why you keep calling, so the ball and chain doesn't suspect a thing." Valerie typed a reply. "Trip is fine. Kids are sleeping. I'm exhausted. Good night." Not a single extra word. Not a single term of endearment. Not a single familiar heart emoji, which she used to put at the end of every message to her husband. Let him start to guess. Or let him not guess. She didn't care. No, she did care. It hurt so much that she wanted to howl out loud, to bang her head against the train window, to scream for the whole car to hear. But she stayed silent. She always stayed silent. For 15 years, she had stayed silent, endured, believed, forgiven things she hadn't even known about. Faithful, reliable, convenient Valerie. A household appliance in a bathrobe. Outside the window, it was getting dark. Lights flashed by stations, railroad crossings, solitary street lamps by utility sheds. Valerie lay awake and wondered when it had started. A year ago? 2? 5? Maybe from the very beginning? Maybe she had never known the real Ian, and had only lived with a convenient version he had crafted for her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ian. "Good night, my love. Sweet dreams." Valerie turned off her phone and turned toward the wall. Florida greeted them with heat and the cry of seagulls. Daisy jumped out of the train car first, spun around on the platform with her arms wide, and yelled for the whole station to hear. The ocean, The ocean. Kyle grabbed his suitcase, adjusted the backpack on his shoulder, and walked toward the exit without looking back. Grown up. Independent. Valerie looked at his straight back and thought, he will be a husband someday too. What kind? Like Ian, or different? They took a shuttle bus to the guest house. The hostess, Tammy, a large woman with kind eyes and weather-beaten hands, met them in the courtyard under an awning of citrus trees. Oh, what a beauty. She pinched Daisy's cheek, and what a serious young man. Just like his father, I bet. Valerie flinched. Just like his father. Yes, an exact physical copy. But inside? What was inside this quiet teenager who looked at the world from under furrowed brows and rarely smiled? The room was spacious and bright, with 2 beds and a cot. It smelled of fresh linens and the ocean breeze. Valerie opened the window. Below was the courtyard with an orange tree, and further out, past the roofs, sparkled a strip of the ocean. Mom, let's go to the beach. Daisy was already pulling on her swimsuit. Let's unpack first. Valerie forced herself to smile. She unpacked the suitcase mechanically, sorting clothes onto the closet shelves. Her hands worked on their own, while her head was far away. Back in the apartment, in the foyer, where the beige wallpaper and the welcome mat were, ball and chain, sheep, household appliance. The words spun in her head like a broken record, and every rotation inflicted fresh pain. Her phone rang. Ian. Valerie looked at the screen. At his photo. A smiling face, a tanned neck, a white t-shirt. She pressed decline. He called back a minute later. She declined again. A message arrived. Val. Why aren't you picking up? I'm worried. She replied once they were on the beach. Bad reception. Everything is fine. And she muted her phone. On the beach, Daisy squealed with delight, jumping in the waves. Kyle lay on his towel, his back to the sun, listening to music. Valerie sat under an umbrella and looked at the ocean. It was deep blue, calm, endless. Indifferent to everything human, to love, to betrayal, to pain, to pancakes with syrup, and to the words, kitten, I'm free. An older woman in a wide-brimmed hat settled on the lounge chair next to hers. She pulled out a book, put on her glasses, but didn't start reading. Instead, she turned to Valerie. Here alone with the kids? She asked. My husband is working, Valerie answered automatically. I see, the woman nodded. My husband worked his whole life too. He worked, and then it turned out he wasn't just working at the factory. She laughed a dry, bitter laugh of someone who had gotten over the sickness a long time ago. Valerie stayed silent. She couldn't talk about it. Not now, not with a stranger, not even with herself. The first 3 days passed in a fog. Valerie took the kids to the beach, fed them at cafes, walked along the boardwalk, bought Daisy seashells and ice cream. She did everything a mother is supposed to do on vacation. She smiled when she needed to smile, laughed when Daisy said something funny, took photos of sunsets, and sent them to Ian without captions, without hearts. Ian called every evening. Valerie picked up and answered shortly, dryly, strictly business. Yes, everything is fine. Yes, the kids are good. No, we don't need anything. Good night, Val. You're acting a bit strange, he said on the 3rd evening. Did something happen? Just tired from the trip, she replied. Everything is normal. If you say so. He went quiet, then said softly, almost a whisper, I love you. Valerie closed her eyes. Those words used to make her feel warm and safe. Now, they made her sick. Physically sick, a spasm in her throat, a sour taste in her mouth. Good night, she said, and hung up. On the 4th day, Kyle grabbed her hand when Daisy ran off to play with some girls in the guest house courtyard. Mom, he said, stop it. Stop what? Valerie tried to smile. Stop pretending. I'm not a kid. I see you crying at night. Do you think I can't hear? The walls are thin. Valerie looked away. Her lips trembled. Is it about Dad? Kyle asked directly. She wanted to lie. She wanted to say, no, it's exhaustion, it's stress, it's getting older. But she looked at her son, at his serious face that was too mature for his years, at his stubborn father's forehead and his mother's brown eyes. And she couldn't. Yes, she said, it's about Dad. Did he do something? Valerie stayed silent for a long time. A minute. 2. An eternity. Then she said, I accidentally overheard him talking on the phone. When I went back for my ID, Kyle didn't ask what the conversation was about. He didn't ask who it was with. He just stood there, his fists clenched, and Valerie saw his jaw muscles clenching, exactly like Ian's when he was angry. I get it, he finally said. Kyle, listen. Valerie grabbed him by the shoulders. This is between me and Dad. This is adult stuff. You don't have to take anyone's side. I'm not taking sides. He looked away. I've known for a while. The ground dropped out from under her feet. Valerie took a step back and sank onto a wooden bench in the courtyard. What do you mean, you've known for a while? I saw his texts. By accident. About 5 months ago, he left his phone on the kitchen counter. A message popped up. I picked it up to look, and you stayed silent. Valerie's voice broke into a whisper. Kyle shrugged helplessly, childishly, even though his whole demeanor said he wanted to look grown-up and strong. What was I supposed to say? Mom, Dad is texting some lady? I thought maybe it was nothing. Maybe I misunderstood. I didn't know for sure. Valerie pulled him to her, hugged him tightly, inhaling the scent of his hair, sun, salt, childhood. He didn't pull away. He stood with his forehead pressed against her shoulder and stayed silent. A 14-year-old boy who had carried the secret of his father's betrayal inside him for 5 months and didn't know what to do with it. I'm sorry, Valerie said. I'm sorry you had to find out. It's not your fault, Kyle muttered, pulling back. His eyes were red, but dry. He wasn't crying. He wouldn't allow himself to. What are you going to do? Valerie looked at the orange tree, at the twisted branches, the dark leaves, the small green fruit that hadn't ripened yet. I don't know, she answered honestly. I don't know yet. On the 5th day of the vacation, Valerie called her mother, not because she wanted advice, she knew exactly what her mom would say, but she no longer had the strength to stay silent. The secret was eating her from the inside, like rust, and she needed to let it out, at least partially, at least in a whisper. Helen answered on the first ring. She always kept her phone close when her daughter was traveling. Valerie, honey, how's the vacation? Is Daisy getting a tan? Kyle behaving? Mom. Valerie sat on the bed, making sure the door was closed. The kids had gone to the beach. Kyle had promised to keep an eye on Daisy. After their conversation in the courtyard, he had changed. Not more affectionate, no harder, more focused, as if he had taken on the role of the grown man who had to protect the family. Mom, I need to tell you something. Helen went silent. She was a wise woman, and from the very first notes in her daughter's voice, she understood this wasn't going to be about sunburns and boat rides. Valerie told her everything. About the forgotten ID, going back, the voice from the kitchen, the kitten and the ball and chain, the household appliance in a bathrobe. She spoke erratically, swallowing her words. Only at the very end, when she got to the part where Ian ran out of the building with her ID and kissed her cheek, did her voice break. She cried quietly, pressing her fist to her mouth so the hostess in the next room wouldn't hear. Her mother listened in silence. Not once did she interrupt. Not once did she gasp. Not once did she say, I knew it, or I warned you. When Valerie had cried herself out and gone quiet, Helen remained silent for a long time. So long that Valerie thought the call had dropped. Mom, are you there? I'm here. Her mother's voice was hollow, heavy. I'm here, sweetie. Listen to me carefully. Don't do anything rash. You're running on emotion right now, and any decision made in that state will be the wrong one. Finish your vacation, get your head straight, and then you decide. What is there to decide, Mom? Valerie wiped her face with a towel. He's cheating on me, calling me a ball and chain, laughing at me with that woman. What is there to decide? A lot, Helen said firmly. You have 2 kids, a condo, 15 years of your life. You can't just throw that away like a pair of old shoes. Men, Val, they're all the same. Every last one of them. Your father wasn't a saint either, but we lived a full life, and I don't regret a thing. Valerie froze. Dad cheated on you too? A pause. Long. Ringing. There was an incident, Helen said slowly, choosing her words like choosing stones for a wall. A long time ago, you were about 5. I found out. I cried, I screamed, I broke some plates. And then I thought, so I leave, and then what? I'll be alone with a kid, no money, no house, no husband to lean on. And he'll go live with his little tramp and not have a care in the world. Who does that help? It helps you, Mom. It helps you, because you wouldn't have to live with a traitor. Stop with the dramatic words. Her mother's voice grew sterner. Traitor, not a traitor. Life isn't a movie. In real life, things are more complicated. Your father spent the rest of his life atoning for that sin. He carried me on a pedestal, right up until his last day. And he died holding my hand, by the way. Is that not love? Valerie stayed silent. She didn't know how to respond to that. Her mother's truth was the truth of a different generation, a different time, when a woman endured and stayed silent because that's how things were done, because a woman's youth is short, because all men are the same, and because perfect is the enemy of good. Mom, I'm not you, Valerie said quietly. I won't be able to get into the same bed with him and pretend nothing happened. I won't be able to. You will, Helen said confidently. If you want to, you will. A woman can do anything when it comes to keeping her family together. They said goodbye heavily, without their usual affectionate words. Valerie put the phone down and sat on the bed for a long time, staring at the wall. Then she got up, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. 37 years old. Fine, radiant wrinkles around her eyes from smiling. She smiled a lot. Smiled her whole life. Chestnut hair with the first threads of gray at the temples. She dyed them every month, meticulously, obsessively, so Ian wouldn't see, to stay young, to be attractive to him, and he still went and found a kitten. Valerie walked out into the courtyard and sat under the orange tree. Tammy, the hostess, brought her some sweet tea and a slice of peach cobbler. Feeling sad, sweetie? She asked, sitting next to her. Just thinking. Valerie wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Husband not calling? He calls every evening. Well, that's wonderful. Tammy nodded. Means he loves you. You're just worn out from the trip. It'll pass. The ocean heals everything, body and soul. Valerie drank her tea and watched the sun set behind the roofs. Huge, orange, molten, beautiful. So beautiful it made her want to cry. Or maybe it wasn't the beauty. Maybe it was because there was no one beside her to truly share this beauty with. The kids, yes, but kids are kids. They need a mother, not a girlfriend. They need a cheerful, strong, confident mother, not a crushed woman with empty eyes. That evening, after putting Daisy to bed, Valerie stepped out onto the balcony. Kyle walked over, stood next to her, and leaned on the railing. You called Grandma, he asked. I did. What did she say? She said, endure it, Kyle scoffed. Contemptuous, angry, entirely unchildlike. Grandma endured it her whole life. And what? Grandpa's gone. She's left alone in an empty house. Her friends drifted away. She doesn't go to work. She sits in front of the TV and talks to a portrait. Is that a happy life to you? Valerie turned to her son. He stood gripping the railing until his knuckles were white, staring at the ocean. In the twilight, he looked older, taller, more mature. Not a boy, almost a man, with his father's looks and his mother's heart. You shouldn't endure it, Mom, he said quietly. Nobody should endure that. That's not love. It's a habit. And you can break a habit. Valerie put her arm around his shoulders. He didn't pull away. When did you get so smart? She asked. When I saw those texts, he answered simply. They stood on the balcony and stayed silent. Below them, the ocean roared. The wind carried the smell of salt and seaweed. And for the first time in 5 days, Valerie felt something resembling resolve. Thin, fragile, like a sprout pushing through asphalt, but alive. She didn't yet know what her decision would be, but she knew it would be her own. Not her mother's, not someone else's, not dictated by a fear of loneliness or by habit. Hers, and only hers. The second week of the vacation began with rain. A gray sky settled over the roofs. The wind chased wet leaves along the boardwalk, and the ocean turned from a gentle blue into a heavy, unwelcoming slate gray. Daisy was cranky. She wanted the beach. She wanted ice cream. She wanted to go home to Daddy. Every time she heard the word daddy, Valerie flinched, but she held it together. She had made a decision. Not immediately, not in one night. It ripened slowly, like the green oranges in Tammy's courtyard. Day by day, conversation by conversation with herself, sleepless night after sleepless night, Valerie sorted through the years of their life together like counting rosary beads, bead by bead, memory by memory. And to her horror, she discovered things she hadn't noticed before, or hadn't wanted to notice. That New Year's Eve, 3 years ago, when Ian went out to get some air at 11 p.m. and came back at 2 a.m., smelling of strange perfume and champagne. He said he ran into a neighbor, and they had a drink in the courtyard. Valerie believed him. That birthday of Daisy's, when he was an hour and a half late and showed up with a massive bouquet of red roses for Valerie, not for their daughter. He apologized, said traffic was terrible, the whole city was gridlocked. Valerie believed him then, too. The roses sat on the table, red and heavy like drops of blood, and Valerie admired them and thought what a wonderful husband she had. A wonderful husband who lived a double life, who kissed his wife in the morning and called his mistress in the afternoon, who said, "I only love you," and then whispered kitten to someone else, and not a single muscle on his face twitched, not one. Ian kept calling. Valerie answered briefly, reservedly, without her former warmth. He sensed the shift he couldn't not sense it, but apparently chalked it up to exhaustion, vacation blues, or the bad weather. Either he didn't care, or he was too busy with his kitten to think deeply about it. "When you get back, I'm throwing you a royal dinner," he promised on their second-to-last evening. "Candles, wine, music. I miss you terribly." "Uh-huh," Valerie said. "Are you sure you're okay? You haven't been yourself lately." "I'm perfectly fine. Good night." She hung up and looked at Kyle. He was sitting on the bed with a book, but he wasn't reading, he was listening. "A royal dinner," he repeated with a bitter smirk. "With candles? I wonder if he lit those same candles when his kitten came over." "Kyle." Valerie shook her head. "Don't." "Then how, Mom? Just pretend everything is fine? Come home, sit down at his dinner with his candles and say, 'Thank you, honey?'" Valerie was silent. Her son was saying out loud exactly what she had been thinking but didn't dare articulate. "I'm not going to pretend," she finally said. "I will talk to him when we get back." "And what will you say? The truth? That I know everything, and that I need time to decide how we're going to live from here on out." Kyle nodded. Seriously, like an adult approving a military battle plan. On the final day, the sun came out. Daisy finally got her fill of swimming, collected a whole bag of seashells and pebbles, and got sunburned on one shoulder despite the sunscreen. Valerie sat on the shore and watched her daughter build a sandcastle. Turrets, walls, a moat around it. A beautiful, fragile castle that the very first wave would lick away without a trace, just like their family. For 15 years, she had built this castle, bead by bead, brick by brick. Morning breakfasts, evening dinners, weekends together, birthdays, holidays, fights and reconciliations, laughter and tears. Daisy's first steps, and Kyle's first failing grade. Renovating the condo and taking beach vacations. Her entire life invested in this castle, and it turned out to be made of sand. On the train ride back, Valerie couldn't sleep. She lay there, listening to the clatter of the wheels, rehearsing the conversation. She knew she would break down, knew she would cry. She knew Ian would make excuses, dodge, lie, swear that it meant nothing, that he only loved her, that the other woman was a mistake, a lapse in judgment, a moment of madness. She knew all his words in advance, because she had seen these scenes 1,000 times in movies, in books, in stories from friends. The script is always the same, only the endings are different. Her mother's ending, forgive and endure. Her grandmother's ending, never find out until the husband dies. Her friend Nancy's ending, leave, slamming the door. Her neighbor Zoe's ending, divorce, selling the house, dividing up pots and pans and washing machines in court. What would her ending be? The train was arriving in the morning. Ian had promised to meet them. Valerie imagined him standing on the platform with flowers. Definitely with flowers. He knew how to make an impression. A wide smile, open arms, the smell of familiar cologne. "Val, "Honey, I missed you so much." And the kids would run to him, and Daisy would hang on his neck, and Kyle would shake his hand while looking away. And Valerie would have to hug him in front of everyone, playing the happy wife returning to her loving husband. No, she didn't have to. In the morning, an hour before arrival, Valerie texted Ian, "Don't meet us at the station. We'll take an Uber. We will talk at home." The reply came instantly. "Why? What happened?" She didn't answer. A second message. "Val, you're scaring me. What do you mean talk at home?" A third. "Is this because I forgot to call the day before yesterday? I was in a meeting until late at night." I explained that. A meeting until late at night. Of course. Another meeting, another lie. Valerie turned off her phone and put it in her bag. He wasn't on the platform. He either listened or got scared. Valerie grabbed her suitcase and took Daisy by the hand. Kyle walked beside them, carrying his backpack and the bag of seashells. "Mom, why didn't Dad come?" Daisy craned her neck, squinting against the sun. "He's waiting at home," Valerie said, "cooking us breakfast." She caught Kyle's eye. He didn't say anything, just gave a barely noticeable nod, communicating with his eyes alone. "I'm with you," the nod said. "Whatever happens." The Uber pulled up to their building. The same entrance, the same intercom code, the same steps. Valerie walked up the stairs, feeling her heart pounding in her throat. Third floor. The door, the welcome mat. She took out her key and turned it in the lock. The apartment smelled of cleaning supplies. Ian had cleaned, scrubbing everything until it shined. He had arranged flowers in vases. On the kitchen island sat a fruit basket and a bottle of wine with a ribbon tied around it. A royal reception. A performance for the returning hen. He stood in the hallway without a smile, his face gray, dark circles under his eyes. He understood. From the text messages, the cold phone calls, the lack of heart emojis, he understood that something was broken. "Val," he said hoarsely, "we need to talk." "Yes," she answered, setting her suitcase on the floor. "We do." Daisy rushed to her father, wrapping her arms around his legs, chattering away about the ocean, the seashells, the jellyfish she saw near the shore. Ian mechanically stroked her head, but his eyes never left Valerie. He was searching her face for a clue. What did she know? How much did she know? How did she find out? Valerie looked back at him calmly, and that calmness terrified him more than any screaming. "Daisy, go unpack your seashells," Valerie said in an even voice. "Kyle, show her how to set up a collection. Dad and I are going to talk in the kitchen." Kyle took his sister's hand and led her to her bedroom. Silently, without arguments, without questions, Daisy started to protest. She wanted to show her dad the rock that looked like a heart, but her brother whispered something to her, and she obeyed. Valerie walked into the kitchen and sat at the island, the very same counter where, for 15 years, she had eaten breakfasts, dinners, holiday meals, where she blew out birthday candles, helped Kyle with his homework, fed Daisy oatmeal from a tiny spoon. The light wood counter with a scratch on the corner from when Daisy dragged a fork across it at age 3. Ian sat opposite her. Between them sat the fruit basket and the wine with a bow. Valerie pushed them both aside. "Speak," Ian said. His voice was hollow, strained, alien. "What happened? Why are you like this? I've been calling for 2 weeks, and you answer me like a stranger. I'm going crazy here, losing sleep, and you won't even explain what's going on." "Losing sleep, poor thing." Valerie looked at him. At the handsome, familiar face, the hazel green eyes, the dimple on his chin that she used to love kissing. And she felt nothing, absolutely nothing, emptiness. Like someone had turned off the lights in a room she considered her home. "I came back for my ID," Valerie said. 6 words, just 6. But they slammed onto the table like bricks. And Valerie watched Ian's face change. The color drained from his cheeks, his lips trembled, his pupils dilated. He understood instantly, the way a person understands a guilty verdict. "Val, I was standing in the foyer," she continued in the same even, terrifying voice. "You didn't hear me come in. You were in the kitchen, right in this kitchen, at this island, and you were talking on the phone with your kitten." Ian covered his face with his hands. Big hands with the callus on the index finger. the scar on the knuckle. Familiar hands. Stranger's hands. Val, please listen. No. She shook her head. First, you listen. I heard everything. About the ball and chain who rolled out to the ocean. About how I'm as gullible as a sheep. About the household appliance in a bathrobe. About how a man needs a woman, not casseroles. I heard every single word, Ian. Every single one. He dropped his hands. His face was wet with sweat or tears. Valerie couldn't tell and didn't care to figure it out. It was stupid. He started talking fast, erratically, choking on his words. It didn't mean anything. I was talking nonsense, bragging like an idiot. Guys do that, Val. You don't understand. It was bravado. Showing off. I didn't mean a single thing I said. You're not an appliance. You're not a ball and chain. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Was, Valerie repeated. That's the exact word. Was. Are. He leaned forward, grabbing her hand. She yanked it away. Val, you are, and you always will be. I love you. I'm an idiot, a scumbag. But I love you. Who is she? Valerie asked. It doesn't matter. Who is she? A pause. Ian stared at the counter. A woman from work. Ashley from accounting. How long? Silence. How long, Ian? 1.5 years. 1.5 years. Valerie leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. 1.5 years. This wasn't an accident, a mistake, a moment of weakness. It was a parallel life. 1.5 years of lies. 1.5 years of double standards. 1.5 years of kissing her goodnight and calling his kitten in the morning. While Valerie washed his shirts, cooked his dinners, raised his kids, and went to his mother's birthday with a homemade cake, he was living another life with another woman and laughing at the boring wife who didn't notice a thing. Did you bring her here? Valerie asked. Here, to our condo, to our bedroom, onto our bed? He stayed silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any answer. Valerie stood up. Slowly, heavily, as if she had aged 20 years in 10 minutes. She walked to the window and looked out at the courtyard. The sandbox, the swing set, the bench by the entrance. Daisy used to ride those swings. When she was 4, Ian used to push her and yell, higher, even higher, and Valerie stood nearby, terrified her daughter would fall, and entirely happy. Val, I'm begging you. He stood up behind her. Let's fix this. I'll break it off with her. I already did. While you were in Florida, I told her it was over. I swear to you. I swear on the kids. Don't you dare. Valerie spun around. For the first time in the entire conversation, her voice shook. Don't you dare swear on the kids. You lost that right. He dropped to his knees. Right there, in the middle of the kitchen, on the cold tile floor that Valerie mopped every other day. A large grown man, 40 years old, broad shoulders, strong jaw on his knees, with a wet face and trembling lips. Forgive me. He wrapped his arms around her legs. Forgive me. I understand everything. It's my fault. I'm the lowest. But don't leave. Don't destroy our family. Think about the kids. Think about Daisy. She's 9. She needs a father. Think about Kyle. Ah, Kyle. Valerie took a step back. You want to talk about Kyle? He froze on the floor. His mouth opened and closed like a fish washed ashore. He knew. He knew for 5 months. He saw your text messages and stayed silent. A 14-year-old boy carried that inside him because he didn't know how to tell his mother that his father was a liar. Kyle knew? Ian whispered. Yes. And he knows now. And he looks at you with different eyes. Eyes a son should never use to look at his father. Ian covered his face with his hands and wept. Truly, uncontrollably, the way men who aren't used to crying weep. Ugly, hoarse, gasping tears. His shoulders shook, and Valerie looked down at him, 2 feelings warring inside her, pity and disgust. Pity, because she had lived with this man for 15 years and didn't know how not to pity him. Disgust, because she watched him grovel on the floor that his mistress had walked on. Get up, Valerie said. Get off the floor. The kids will hear. He got up heavily, awkwardly, grabbing the edge of the counter. He stood before her pathetic, crushed, with red eyes and wet cheeks. Not a winner, not a hero, not the man she had married, I need time, Valerie said. I am not making a decision today. Or tomorrow. You will sleep on the couch in the living room. Act normally around the kids. Not a word to Daisy. Don't touch Kyle. Don't make excuses to him. He will decide himself when he wants to talk to you. How much time? Ian asked. As much as it takes, Valerie answered, and walked out of the kitchen. Strange, agonizing days dragged on. The condo, previously warm and noisy, turned into a place where 4 people existed separately, only occasionally bumping into each other in the hallway and the kitchen. Ian slept on the couch in the living room, left for work early, and came back late. Not because he was staying late at the office, Valerie verified that now, but because he was afraid to come home. Afraid of the silence that met him instead of the usual dinners on the stove. How was your day? Daisy sensed something was wrong, but didn't understand exactly what. She kept pestering Valerie. Mom, why is Dad sleeping on the couch? Mom, why aren't you guys talking? Mom, did you have a fight? Valerie would answer. Dad's snoring was keeping me awake, so he moved to the living room. Daisy believed it. Kids believe their parents until they are given a reason to doubt them, or until they grow up enough to spot a lie. Kyle didn't believe anything. He walked around the condo silently, like a ghost, and never looked at his father. When Ian spoke to him, pass the salt. How are things at school? Let's go watch the game this weekend. Kyle answered in monosyllables, without raising his eyes. Yeah. Fine. No. 3 words. His entire vocabulary for the father he no longer respected. Ian tried. She had to give him that. He tried. He cooked breakfast in the mornings, washed dishes, vacuumed, went grocery shopping, did everything that Valerie used to do as if he wanted to prove that he, too, knew how to be a household appliance. One evening, he came back with a bouquet of peonies Valerie's favorite and placed them on the kitchen island next to a note. Forgive me. I love you. Give me a chance. Valerie put the flowers in a vase. It was a shame to throw them out. The peonies weren't to blame. But she threw the note in the trash without finishing it. On the 3rd day after returning, her mother called. Well, did you talk? We talked. And? Did he cry, crawl on his knees, swear that it's over, and that he only loves you? Yes. Well, there you go, you see? Relief rang in Helen's voice. That means he's not a lost cause. He regrets it. Val, listen to your mother. Give him a second chance. Men, they're like kids. They cause trouble and cry about it. But if he's wised up, if he's begging, if he's on his knees, that means his family is more important to him. Mom. Valerie rubbed her temples in exhaustion. He lied to me for 1.5 years. 1.5 years. That's not a mistake, that's a lifestyle. And you're without sin. You never lied to him. Don't compare. I'm not comparing. I'm saying that in a family, there's always blame on both sides. Maybe you didn't give him enough of something. Maybe you didn't pay him enough attention. You have to keep a man interested, Val. Feed him. Praise him. Don't reject him in bed. But you're always tired, constantly in a bathrobe, with wet hair after a shower. What man can put up with that? Valerie hung up without saying goodbye. For the first time in her life, she hung up on her mother, her hand shaking with anger. She was to blame. She didn't give enough. She was in a bathrobe. There it was. That exact line of reasoning that makes you want to scream. The wife is to blame for the husband cheating. The wife didn't try hard enough, didn't cook well enough, didn't look good enough, didn't love him enough. And he, poor, miserable, unloved man, went looking for comfort elsewhere, not guilty, a victim of circumstance, a victim of a wife in a bathrobe. A week later, Valerie finally called a friend for the first time in a long while. Nancy, an old high school friend, the only person Valerie trusted as much as herself. They hadn't seen each other in 6 months. Nancy had her own problems. 2 kids, no husband, working shift rotations at the hospital. But friendship isn't measured by frequency of meetups. True friendship is measured by whether you can call at midnight, say I feel awful, and know you will be heard. Nancy listened without interrupting, without gasping or sighing. Then she said, All right, I'm coming over tomorrow during my lunch break. I'll get coverage at work. We'll sit down and talk properly. You don't solve these things over the phone." She arrived with a cake and a bottle of bourbon. Valerie smirked. "It's 11 a.m. Nancy shrugged. For conversations like this, the time of day doesn't matter. They sat in the kitchen. Again, the kitchen. All the most important conversations in this home happened in the kitchen. They drank coffee, spiked with bourbon, and talked. "I went through this," Nancy said. She spoke calmly, without drama. "My Mark, remember him? He ran around on me too. I found out when the youngest was 2. You know what I did? I left. Not right away. First, I forgave him. Just like your mom advised, I gave him a second chance. He repented, cried, brought flowers every day. He held out for a month, then it all started again. The same late nights, the same phone calls on the balcony, the same smell of strange perfume. Only now he was smarter. He learned to hide it. And I became paranoid. I checked his phone, sniffed his shirts, drove to his office unannounced. You know what I turned into? A detective, a warden, an angry, suspicious hag rummaging through other people's pockets. And that's when I realized, this is no way to live." Valerie listened and recognized herself. She had already caught herself checking Ian's phone while he was in the shower, sniffing his clothes, analyzing every word, every look, every time he was 5 minutes late. It was poisoning her, turning her into someone she didn't want to be. "I left 4 months later," Nancy continued. "It was hard. The first year was hell. No money, no help. My mom was far away, the kids were little. But you know what? I slept peacefully. For the first time in years, I slept without listening for a strange phone to buzz. I didn't wake up filled with anxiety. I didn't torture myself wondering where he was, who he was with, why he wasn't picking up." "You didn't own your place," Valerie said. "You own this condo? It's in your name, you told me." Valerie nodded. The condo was bought with her money, an inheritance from her grandmother. Ian didn't make much back then. He was just starting his career. Valerie put every penny into this apartment, and it was titled in her name. "Then it's easier for you." Nancy took a sip of her coffee. "The condo is yours. The kids are with you. Let him go to his kitten and build a life from scratch. It sounds simple when you say it." Valerie shook her head. "And when you do it, it hurts?" "Yeah, it hurts a lot. But the pain fades. The humiliation doesn't. The humiliation lasts forever. Every time you get into bed with him, you'll think, was he with her today? Every time he works late, you'll go crazy. Is that what you want? That life?" Valerie was silent. Outside the window, sparrows chirped. Somewhere downstairs, the building's front door slammed. A car drove by. Normal sounds of a normal day. But inside, everything was flipping upside down, breaking, restructuring itself like a house after an earthquake. "I'm scared," Valerie said. "I'm scared of being alone." Nancy put her mug down and took Valerie's hand. "You're already alone, Val. You were alone for that entire year and a half. You just didn't know it." The decision came at night. Not like a revelation, not like a lightning strike. Quietly, simply, routinely. Valerie lay in the dark, listening to Ian tossing and turning on the couch on the other side of the wall, and suddenly she understood it all. Enough. Not because she hated him, not because she wanted revenge, but because she simply couldn't anymore. The way a person can't carry a rock that's too heavy, not out of weakness, but out of honesty with herself. In the morning, she waited until Daisy left for school, and Kyle closed the door behind him, then walked into the kitchen. Ian was sitting at the island, drinking coffee. Unshaven, gaunt, bags under his eyes. Over the 2 weeks since she returned, he had lost about 10 pounds. His cheeks were hollow. His dress shirts hung off his shoulders. He raised his head and looked at Valerie. And in his eyes she saw hope. Small, pathetic hope, clinging to her every look, every word, every day she hadn't said the terrible thing. "Ian," Valerie said, "I want you to move out." The hope died, like a candle blown out all at once, without warning. He set the mug on the counter, and the coffee sloshed over the rim. A brown puddle spread across the light wood. "Val, no." His voice shook. "Please don't. I've changed. I realized everything. I prove it to you every single day. You prove to me that you know how to wash dishes and vacuum, she interrupted. That's not what I need. I needed trust. And it's gone. And it won't come back. How do you know it won't? Give me a year, 6 months, 3 months, I'll prove it. You can't prove loyalty, Ian. Loyalty isn't proven. You either keep it or you don't. You didn't. For a year and a half, you didn't. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life checking if you're keeping it now. He stood up, walked around the counter, and tried to take her hands. Valerie stepped back. Don't touch me, please. Just listen. I don't want a scandal. I don't want a war. We are adults. We have 2 kids. Let's separate like human beings. Like human beings, he repeated bitterly. You talk about divorce like human beings as if you're talking about a bathroom remodel. How am I supposed to talk? Scream? Break plates? I've already cried all my tears, Ian. All of them, down to the last drop. I spent 2 weeks in Florida bawling into my pillow so the kids wouldn't hear, even though Kyle heard anyway. For 2 weeks I talked to myself, looking for excuses, reasons, ways out. And I didn't find a single way out that didn't turn me into either a warden or a doormat. Ian sat back down, dropping his head into his hands. His shoulders shook, but Valerie didn't approach him. She stood by the wall and looked at the man she used to love, feeling neither anger nor triumph, only pity and exhaustion. Endless, draining exhaustion. The condo is mine, she continued when he quieted down. In my name, bought with my grandma's money. I won't fight you for half the furniture. Take the car. Take it. You will see the kids whenever you want. I won't turn them against you. We'll tell Daisy that Daddy has to travel for work. Then we'll gradually explain it to her. You don't need to explain anything to Kyle. He already understands everything. Val, you can't just decide this for both of us. Ian raised his head. His eyes were inflamed, red, but dry. He must have run out of tears, too. We are a family. This has to be a mutual decision. No, you made a decision for both of us. When you called your kitten and invited her to our apartment, that's when you decided. I am just seeing your decision through to the end. He stayed silent for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and pressed his forehead against the glass. He stood like that for a minute, 2 minutes. Valerie saw how his back tensed under his wrinkled t-shirt, how his fists clenched and unclenched. I have nowhere to go, he finally said, quietly, without hysterics, without pressure. Just a fact. My mom lives in a 1-bedroom apartment. She has a cat and high blood pressure. Friends. I don't have the kind of friends I can just crash with. Renting an apartment takes time. Money. I am giving you 2 weeks, Valerie said. 14 days, exactly as long as my vacation lasted. Remember how happy you were? Free for 2 whole weeks. So, be free. It was cruel. Valerie knew it was cruel, but she couldn't stop herself. Just this once, she allowed herself to strike, and she struck with precision, right where it hurt most. Ian flinched as if she had slapped him. He turned around, looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw not resentment, not anger, but shame. Genuine, burning, unfeigned shame. And in that moment, she believed it. He truly regretted it. He wasn't acting, wasn't pretending. He was in real pain and real shame, but it didn't change a thing. Okay, he said. He left for work without eating breakfast. Valerie was left alone in the empty apartment. She wiped the puddle of coffee off the counter, washed the mug, and wiped down the wood. Familiar, mechanical movements. Then she sat on a stool and stared at the refrigerator for a long time. The magnet. Greetings from the south. The sun, with its idiotic smile. She got up, took it off, and twirled it in her fingers. Light, plastic, cheap. She threw it in the trash can and felt a tiny, barely perceptible sense of relief. That evening, when the kids were home, Ian returned from work and shut himself in the living room. Daisy knocked on the door. She wanted to show him a drawing. He opened it and crouched down in front of her. He spent a long time looking at the drawn house with a chimney and flowers. He praised her, smiled, hugged her, and Valerie, watching from the hallway, felt her heart clench, because her daughter didn't know that this house was about to fall apart, that her dad would be living somewhere else, that the flowers in the front yard were a fiction, a beautiful childhood fantasy with no connection to reality. Kyle approached Valerie after dinner. Did you tell him? Yes. He's moving out in 2 weeks. Kyle nodded. And suddenly, for the first time in all these days, his face cracked, not from anger, from pain. He was a teenager, a child, a boy who was losing his father. Not losing him forever, not entirely, but losing his familiar world, his routine, the familiar good morning, son, at breakfast. And no matter how hard he tried to look grown-up and strong, it hurt. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want him to leave, but I don't want him to stay like this." Valerie hugged her son, pulled him close, feeling him tremble. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." The 2 weeks passed faster than Valerie expected. Ian didn't make scenes, didn't beg, didn't throw tantrums. Something inside him had broken after that conversation in the kitchen. He became quiet, submissive, almost invisible. He came home from work, ate dinner separately, and locked himself in the living room. In the evenings, Valerie could hear him talking on the phone to his mother, quietly, guiltily, like a schoolboy in trouble, explaining that it was his fault, that Valerie wouldn't listen, didn't want to. On the 10th day, he found an apartment. A one-bedroom, not far from the kids' school, on the 3rd floor of an older building with high ceilings and creaky floors. Valerie didn't ask for details. He brought it up himself at dinner, in front of the kids, calmly, as if talking about moving offices. "Dad is going to live separately for a little while," he said, looking at Daisy. "It's required for work, but I'll come over every day, and we'll spend the weekends together." Daisy blinked rapidly. Her lower lip jutted out, her chin trembled. "Why can't you work here? You used to work here." "That's just how it goes, sweetie." Ian stroked her hair. "Sometimes adults need to live a little differently for a while, so things can get better later." "Will it get better?" Daisy looked at her mother. Valerie opened her mouth and closed it. She couldn't promise. She no longer knew how to promise things she wasn't certain of. Enough promises. Enough beautiful words. Enough sandcastles. "We'll try," she finally said. "We will both try." Kyle stayed silent, picking at his mac and cheese with a fork. Then he suddenly raised his head and looked at his father. For the first time in 3 weeks, directly, openly, point blank. "Dad," he said, "actually come over. Seriously, come over. Just don't lie about that, at least." Ian's face contorted. He swallowed hard, nodded, and turned to the window. Valerie saw his jaw muscles working as he fought back tears in front of the kids. He held them back. On the final night, after the kids were asleep, Ian knocked on the master bedroom door. Valerie opened it. He stood on the threshold, holding a cardboard box. Inside were his things, his razor, his watch, a book, his phone charger. "I'll come back for the rest tomorrow," he said. "I asked Luke from work to help, he's got a pickup truck." "Okay." They stood facing each other in the narrow hallway. And suddenly, Valerie saw him exactly as he was 15 years ago. Young, confused, with big hands and an awkward smile. He had stood in front of her in her old apartment building lobby, bringing her an umbrella because it had started raining and she had left the house without one. They had known each other for 2 weeks. He was soaked through, water dripping from his hair, but he held the umbrella over her and smiled. And Valerie had thought then, "This is him. He's my person." It turned out he was a stranger. Val. He looked up at her, even though he was a head taller. That happens when a person feels very small. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, you are not a ball and chain, not a sheep, not an appliance. You are the best person I've ever met. And what I did, it wasn't because you were bad. It was because I was a fool. A selfish, cowardly fool who didn't value what he had." Valerie stayed silent. The words were right. They were beautiful. They were born of suffering. But words had no value anymore. Words had depreciated, like currency during a crisis. She had heard enough words to last the rest of her life. "Good night," she said, and closed the door. He left in the morning. Quietly, early, while Daisy was still asleep, Kyle walked out into the hallway as his father was putting on his shoes. They looked at each other, and something passed between them without words, without gestures, with just their eyes. Then Kyle held out his hand. Ian shook it, held it in his palm, pulled his son toward him, and hugged him. Kyle didn't pull away. He stood with his forehead pressed against his father's shoulder. A second, 2, 3. Then he stepped back, nodded, and went to his room. Ian picked up his box, looked at the master bedroom door closed, silent, and walked out of the apartment. The lock clicked. Valerie stood behind the bedroom door and listened. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, slow, counting every step. The building's front door slammed. A car engine started. The sound of the engine, moving away, fading, disappearing. Silence. Valerie walked out into the hallway. Empty. Her coat was on the rack, the kids' windbreakers, Daisy's umbrella with the ducks. His jackets were gone. His shoes were gone. His smell was gone. The apartment felt larger, quieter. Valerie walked into the living room. The couch was made, the pillow put away, the blanket folded. Clean, neat, as if no one had ever been there. On the coffee table lay an envelope. Valerie picked it up, turned it over in her hands. Unlabeled. She opened it. Inside was a wedding photo, the exact one from the nightstand in the bedroom. She in the white dress, he in the suit, both laughing. On the back, in his handwriting large, uneven, "This was the happiest day of my life. I'm sorry that on all the other days, I wasn't worthy of it." Valerie stared at the photograph for a long time. Two young, happy, foolish people who didn't know what awaited them. She traced her finger over his face in the photo. A 25-year-old Ian with a dimple on his chin and laughing eyes. Where did you get lost? In what year, on which turn did you go the wrong way? She put the photo back into the envelope and placed it in the dresser drawer. Daisy woke up an hour later. She walked into the kitchen, sleepy. A crease from the pillow imprinted on her cheek. "Where's Dad?" "He went to work, sweetie." "Early this morning. To his new apartment?" "Yes. But he'll come over on Saturday," he promised. Daisy nodded, climbed onto a stool, and reached for her cereal. 9 years old. At 9, the world is still simple. Dad left, Dad will come back. Everything will be fine, because Mom said, "We'll try." Kyle came out later. He poured himself some tea in silence, sat at the island, and looked at his mother. Valerie met his gaze calmly, firmly, without tears. She had done her crying, cried leaders, rivers, oceans. Enough. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm okay," she answered, and it was the truth. Not great, not excellent, not wonderful. Okay. Bearable. She was on her feet, breathing, making oatmeal for the kids, getting Daisy ready for school, checking Kyle's homework. Life went on. A different life. Unfamiliar, scary, but her own. Without lies, without suspicion, without listening for someone else's phone. That evening, after putting Daisy to bed, Valerie stepped out onto the balcony. The city lay below her. Lights, roofs, antennas, strangers' windows with strangers' lives. Somewhere out there, in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor, Ian sat alone with a cardboard box and guilt that couldn't be washed away by any tears. And here stood Valerie, also alone, but her loneliness was different. It was a choice, not a sentence. She had chosen herself. For the first time in 15 years, she had chosen herself. Not her family, not habit, not fear. And because of that choice, she felt pain, fear, and strangely enough freedom. Her phone rang. Ian. Valerie looked at the screen. Her finger hovered over the button. She inhaled the evening air cool, clean, carrying the scent of autumn leaves, and pressed answer. "Yes? Val. How are you guys doing?" "We're fine. Daisy is sleeping. Kyle is reading. Everything is good." A pause, long, fragile, like thin ice. "Thank you," he said. "Good night." "Good night, Ian." She hung up, stood on the balcony for another minute, then went back inside. She locked the balcony door and went to sleep. Tomorrow would be a new day, a hard one, a normal one. Hers, and only hers. A like from you is a big support for the channel. Subscribe for more soulful stories. May your family bonds only grow stronger. See you in the next episode.